It's The Law Show on CL 650. A comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law. Now, here's Sterling Fox.
Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so cross your heart?
We will tell the truth on The Law Show today. We cross our hearts. Good morning and welcome to the program. I'm Sterling Fox, joined in studio by Joe Murphy and Alex Sein-Wittgenstein from Murphy Batista LLP, Vancouver personal injury lawyers, downtown at 650 West Georgia Street. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome back to The Law Show.
Good morning.
Good morning, Sterling.
Good to have you with us. We're going to talk about wrongful death on this program. A very fascinating topic. I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to learning a lot in the next hour. To be quite truthful with both of you. But Joe, let's back up a little bit and find out who we're talking about. Murphy Batista, a firm. Now I know because I have children of a certain age who actually won't believe that back in the day when you and Joe Batista started your firm as a two-man, two-assistant operation, interest rates for people wanting to go into business in those days were 19%. I have children who personally actually believe that no such thing is possible. They're that young. In fact, they were 19% back in the early 80s, weren't they?
Sterling, if you added the fact that cell phones didn't exist then and fax machines had been invented a few years earlier, people today would be even more shocked. It was January of 1982. Joe Batista and I set the firm up. We rented 2 lawyers' offices and 2 secretarial bays in a larger law firm. Interest rates were 19%, and what was happening is a whole bunch of businesses were closing.
Oh, yeah.
We were one of the few businesses that was opening, and of course our bank was very skeptical that we would make it, which we've done. Over time, the firm has grown, and it's now 17 lawyers. We have a large office in Vancouver. We have about 60 support staff. We have a full floor of one of the towers in downtown Vancouver. We have an office recently opened in Kelowna.
Oh, that's right, yes.
And we have a resource center beside GF Strong that's designed to deal with helping people. It's not legal. It's more resources.
Okay.
So things have changed since January 1982, including the interest rates.
And certainly, let's just say there's a whole generation of young people in for more than a few shocks in their adult years coming up. They just simply don't accept that such a thing was ever possible. Alex Sein-Wittgenstein is an Ontario guy from the National Capital Region who came to Vancouver to the University of British Columbia to go to law school and, well, kind of liked it here and never went back. I'm sure you've been back to visit family and friends, but you never moved back and changed your postal code back, did you?
No, I've been here for about 25 years now, and graduated from UBC. Thereafter, I began working at a law firm, spent about 15 years working for one of the more reputable defense law firms in Vancouver. It's known as a bit of a judge factory. A lot of judges came through that firm.
Oh, interesting.
So I was a partner there, and then after about 15 years, I made the switch over to Murphy Batista to work exclusively on the plaintiff side.
Right.
Whereas before I was working just on the defense side.
And so, and Joe Murphy has introduced us to several of your colleagues at the firm, many of whom have a background similar to yours, Alex. You spent your formative years out of law school working essentially for the other team and learning their playbook. And when you came over to the firm, it really is hugely helpful to understand how the other half thinks. When you go into a fight, legal or otherwise, it's really helpful to know exactly what you're up against, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's the similar scenario would be in criminal law, where you often see a lot of the best defense lawyers actually started working as Crown prosecutors.
Right, yeah.
So in a civil litigation, personal injury context, we learn how the insurance companies work, what the insurance companies are looking for, and how they assess cases and put a dollar figure on it. Mm-hmm. And we know what is required to satisfy that other side in order to bring a claim that they're going to pay out on.
Interesting stuff. So, Alex, we're going to talk about wrongful death on the program today. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, I, for one, am quite looking forward to learning a lot on this program. It's a topic, and certainly a phrase, wrongful death, that we hear a lot. It's in the news a lot. It's in the news, I think, in the States more than it is in Canada. I hear that coming on American newscasts, wrongful death actions being taken more than I hear it in Canada. So in order for us to understand what we're talking about for the balance of this hour, what are we talking? Give us a definition of wrongful death in a British Columbia context.
So wrongful death would be a situation where the death of a loved one, and by that I mean a direct family member, so a parent, your spouse, your husband or wife, or a child has died as a result of negligence of someone. The situations that usually arises in is in a motor vehicle accident,
okay,
or quite often we find it in a medical malpractice situation. And my background is also, I used to act on behalf of hospitals and that for over a dozen years before this, so I've seen those on both sides of the fence as well.
I'll bet you have.
So there's a piece of legislation. It's really old, and it's really, really out of date.
Here in BC?
Here in BC.
Okay.
It's called the Family Compensation Act, and it's got its roots. It goes all the way back to the 1840s in England. And it's basically this old law from England in the 1800s that has been adopted here in BC and is still the same law today, with maybe a few amendments to take out a couple of the old English terms and put in some more modern language. But essentially, it's the same thing. And that's caused a lot of problems for families who've had someone die as a result of someone's negligence in BC.
Give us an example, if you can, how this archaic law, I mean, I suppose it's somewhat stunning that an 1800s law relating to something as important as this matter would be essentially unchanged in 2015. But give us an example of how it complicates things, this ancient law.
Sure. So a wrongful death claim is the same as a personal injury claim in some ways. Namely, first of all, you have to establish that there was negligence.
Okay.
You also have to establish that negligence caused someone to be injured, or in this case, caused someone to die. Once you reach that stage, it differs a lot, though, from a personal injury claim. The Family Compensation Act, which is this statute, provincial statute, says that the only thing that the party the family is entitled to recover for the loss of their loved one is the economic loss that has been caused by that death. So that means there's nothing awarded for the pain and grief that a person may suffer as a result of the death of someone.
So let me see. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me just see if I understand this vintage law. The courts are able to put a dollar figure on the life of a person, and that's all that person is worth in the eyes of that court that day, and no matter what, that's all that's available to even be talked about.
Right, and here's where the really grotesque aspect of this law comes about. It means that if that person who died wasn't financially supporting anyone, didn't have a job, and wasn't contributing to the support of children or what have you, that claim is essentially worth nothing. So let me give you an example.
Please do.
Let's talk about a medical malpractice situation where the doctor treating a 5-year-old boy has been negligent. And we'll take two scenarios. The first one is that doctor, because of his negligence, caused the boy's leg to fracture or caused problems in resetting that fracture. There'd be a claim there for pain and suffering.
Right.
And if that boy then were to grow up and continue to have problems with his leg, which prevented him from working at all jobs in the future, there'd be money for that.
Some disability compensation, right?
Right. And there'd be thousands of dollars for the pain and suffering. There'd be possibly many thousands for the loss of earnings, and there'd be many thousands of dollars that this boy could recover for the cost of care that he needed in the future.
All right.
Now let's use that same doctor, and it's that same 5-year-old boy. And that doctor, this time has not just resulted in a leg fracture to this child, but has actually killed the child. Perhaps it was providing an overdose of a medication,
right,
or something to that effect.
Some negligence.
Some negligence on
caused
his
the
part.
child's death.
That case is worth nothing in the eyes of the law.
Really?
It's unlike the boy who suffered the leg fracture, who will get tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. The family of that boy who died will receive nothing under the Family Compensation Act. And that's because there was no economic loss suffered by them as a result of his death.
Joe Murphy, why is this still the law in British Columbia? It seems beyond archaic, and it seems unbelievably inhumane in terms of recognition of the essentials of grief and pain and suffering and loss, for crying out loud.
Sterling, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers has been for decades lobbying the BC governments, the NDP government, the Socreds, the Liberals, to change that, to fix that. And for some reason that I've never understood, all of these governments, across the board in terms of parties, have done nothing to change it. So it really is so different, it's so unfair. And I think of that tragic case coming out of Ontario where the 3 little children in the family were killed in a motor vehicle collision.
Oh, that's right.
That claim applying the BC law, the loss of all the 3 little kids, is worth nothing. And people would think that is so unfair, and it is, but until the government changes it, that's what we're stuck with in BC. The other provinces deal with this thing very differently and much more fairly.
Well, let's just in this case, it's the province of Ontario. This terrible accident. You're right. It's just a couple of weeks ago, where the grandfather was driving the 3 children. They were T-boned by someone who I think flunked the blood alcohol test, and so how would Ontario law deal with this wrongful death? BC, you said in BC it would be worth the lives of the children in the eyes of the province of British Columbia are worth 0. How does the province of Ontario see those 3 children?
I believe the province of Ontario allows damages for grief, and of course you can imagine the incredible grief,
of course,
by a family who's lost all of their children, and especially knowing that they died as a result of some driver, according to the news reports, blowing through a stop sign.
Yep.
It's just such a tragedy, and the grief, knowing how and why it happened, would be so great. In Ontario, the family's compensated. In BC, they're not. And because their law is different. Their law has been updated. Ours is, as Alex said, it's from the 1840s.
Right. So what would the compensation, Alex, in Ontario be for that poor mom and dad? They lost her father and all 3 of their children. How would Ontario deal with that monetarily?
Well, I don't have the Ontario numbers right in front of me, but I can tell you that it's not just Ontario. It would be Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, even the Yukon, all allow for recovery for grief. So,
right.
So an example I could give you is in Alberta. If a child dies, and even if the child isn't providing any sort of economic benefit to those parents, the parent would be entitled to $82,000 per loss of child. So here we do the math.
It'd be about $250,000.
Approaching $250,000.
Right.
Again, peanuts compared to the actual loss of a child, but an amount that can make a huge difference in the lives of a parent who has just suffered the death of a child and may benefit from grief counseling.
Sure.
May need time off from work to deal with what is probably the most devastating thing that can happen in their lives. But here in BC, unlike all the other Western provinces and a number of the other provinces, nothing is recoverable still. And Joe has already pointed out that this has been lobbying by MAD for many years, decades. And that's been the situation not only from MAD, but it's even the Canadian Bar Association of BC has, as recently as 2014, come out with a paper on it. And I don't want to read too much, but I just want to read this couple sentences as to how they describe the situation. They talk about the situation in BC as follows. The current failure of the law to recognize such losses is offensive and inexplicable to BC families who experience such tragedies, fails to reflect modern-day accepted norms as to the basic fairness in a tort system, and is out of line with the law in most jurisdictions in Canada.
Right.
Now, I just want to add, we've talked about children as being no recovery.
Right.
But the same applies if it's a situation where it's a spouse who hasn't been working, or as someone who's retired, so that they're not bringing in money. So we're not talking about just cases where children die, but it could be someone who's has been recently retired and is killed in an accident, and there's not going to be any real recovery.
It's absolutely stunning. Joe Murphy, just before we take a quick break here, a couple of quick questions. With respect to the paying out, British Columbia doesn't pay out any compensation for grief or loss or pain or suffering, but who, were the law to change, would do the paying out in British Columbia?
The responsible person and essentially their insurer.
So it would be ICBC.
Yes.
So ICBC has been a bit of a cash cow to British Columbia governments of all political stripes for decades. Could it be that the governments don't want their cash cow to stop giving them the amount of cash per annum that they've become accustomed to spend on their social programs?
Well, exactly.
I'm causing you to jump to conclusions here.
And Sterling, ICBC was established to run on a break-even basis and provide an insurance product to the people of BC. It does an excellent job. In my comparing it to other insurers, it does an excellent job of doing that.
Right.
But what the government has been doing for many years is skimming off $200 million, maybe more, maybe less, each year, so that it's not operated on a break-even basis. The government is drawing this money out. So if the law changes and there's less money available to draw out,
right,
one can say the government's failure to act is as a result of them wanting to preserve that cash cow.
Right.
But the idea that ICBC premiums need to go up because they're losing money in part because it's 200 or hundreds of millions of dollars a year. The government's skimming from this scheme that was supposed to be self-funding nonprofit.
When in doubt, friends, follow the money. There's usually an answer at the end of that. I was going to say rainbow, but trail would probably be a little more accurate. We're talking about wrongful death on this episode of The Law Show. Fascinating stuff. Hope you're enjoying it. Back with lots more in a minute.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.